Shalom. My topic today is Tisha B'Av versus settler colonialism. If you want to know what that means, you'll have to tune in until the end. We are now in the period of the Jewish calendar, which is called the 3 weeks, in Yiddish, the Drei Wochen, in Hebrew, Bein HaMetzarim. If one reviews the laws in the Shulchan Aruch, which I am holding here every year, one finds the following prohibitions in Orach Chaim paragraph 551. One is supposed to have less joy at this time of year, less business deals, no betrothals or weddings, no haircuts, no laundry, do not buy new clothing, no meat and wine, do not bathe, and do not recite Shechianu. Of course, the climax of all this is Tisha B'Av itself, when we read Echa and Kinot elegies while sitting on the ground. We are not allowed to eat or drink, to wash, to anoint ourselves with oil, to wear leather shoes, or to have sexual relations. We are not even allowed to study Tanakh, Mishnah, or Midrash. The only exceptions are sad parts of the Tanakh, such as the book of Job, and the Midrash and the book of Echa. In addition, we have other Tisha B'Av customs which are not so well known. For example, Rav Yosef Schwartz, writing a letter from Israel to Europe in 1837, says that it's customary for the Chazan in the land of Israel to put ashes on his forehead, and others do the same during the Tisha B'Av services. He also says that you wrap all of the Torah scrolls and the Aron Kodesh itself in black on Tisha B'Av. And finally, another interesting custom, which is reported by Rabbi Sachar ibn Susan in 1564 from the city of Tzfat, of Safed. He says that on the night of Tisha B'Av, before they have recited anything, the Gabbai gets up and he says in a loud voice, Achenu b'nei Yisrael, our brothers, the house of Israel, you should know that today is such and such number of years since the destruction of our temple of our glory. In addition, we have external descriptions of what Jews did on Tisha B'Av by non-Jewish authors. For example, the traveler from Bordeaux, we do not know his name, he visited the land of Israel in the year 333 of the Common Era. He left us a travel journal in Latin. And this is what he wrote about the Temple Mount on Tisha B'Av. Quote, and there on the Temple Mount there are 2 statues of Hadrian, and not far from the statues a perforated stone to which the Jews come every year, pour oil on it, and they wail with sighing, and they tear their clothing, and then they depart. In other words, once a year on Tisha B'Av, the Jews were allowed to enter the Temple Mount and to mourn the Churban, the destruction of the temple. A similar, though not identical description is given by Hieronymus, in English he's called Saint Jerome, who lived in the land of Israel from 386 to the year 420 of the Common Era. He lived in Beit Lechem, not far from Jerusalem. And this is what he wrote in his commentary to the book of Tzefania, chapter 1. Until today it is forbidden for those two-faced tenants, meaning the Jews, to come to Jerusalem because of the murder of the prophets, and the last of them, the Son of God, unless they come to cry. For then they are given permission to eulogize on the ruins of the city for a fee. On the day of the capture of Jerusalem and its destruction by the Romans, one can see the members of this people, women wearing rags and old men bearing the burden of the rags and the years. They gather for a time of mourning. They prove with their bodies and their dress the meaning of, quote, the anger of the Lord. The members of this poor people lament the ruins of their temple, and they are not worthy of pity. It is precisely because Jerome despised the Jews that his testimony is trustworthy about what they did on the Temple Mount on Tisha B'Av. So what do all of these quaint mourning customs have to do with Zionism and anti-Zionism? In my opinion, everything. I am sitting here in Jerusalem, and I have been living in Jerusalem for 53 years, precisely because the Jewish people mourned Jerusalem and Eretz Yisrael for 1900 years. At the Sixth Zionist Congress in Basel in August 1903, Herzl fought to approve the idea of a substitute territory from the British in Uganda, because it seemed that Palestine was not a possibility. His friend Nordau called it a Nachtassel in German, a night shelter for the persecuted Jews of Russia right after the Kishinev pogrom. A resolution to dispatch an expedition of experts to East Africa was passed by a vote of 295 to 178. A storm broke loose at the Zionist Congress. The Russian members of the Actions Committee stormed out of the room with their supporters. They cried. Jacob Tahask wrote, "Men sat on the floor, mourning in Orthodox fashion for a dead Zion." In other words, the same things we do on Tisha B'Av. And what did Herzl do in his final speech a few days later? He recited in Hebrew, slowly raising his right hand, "Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yamini." If I forget thee, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its cunning. For many years, but especially since October 7th, we have heard thousands of Palestinian demonstrators and their useful idiots on elite campuses such as Columbia, Harvard, and the University of Pennsylvania say that we Jews are, quote, settler colonialists who came here to uproot the indigenous people, the Palestinians. I have news for these anti-Semites and anti-Zionists. As Chaim Weizmann said to Lord Balfour, we lived in Jerusalem when London was still a marsh. We lived in Eretz Yisrael from the days of Abraham until the year 70, almost 2,000 years. And then we continued to live in Israel, even though our numbers were vastly reduced. And in addition, we mourned Eretz Yisrael and Jerusalem from the year 70 until 1948, as I have amply proved. We cannot colonize a land which God promised to Abraham 3,800 years ago. We cannot colonize a land which we fasted for and wept for and recited kinot for thousands of years. Eretz Yisrael has been our eternal home for 3,800 years. We cannot colonize something which has been our homeland for almost 4 millennia. Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yamini. If I forget thee, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its cunning. Shavua Tov from Schechter.